Hi, I'm Ross Mayfield, investment strategy analyst at Baird, and we are back for another weekly update with our friends at Strategas. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Washington research analyst Jeannette Lowe to talk all things policy and politics. Jeannette, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Ross. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for asking. I want to start with energy policy first. Oil prices have been in focus a lot over the last few years, and especially lately, given our battle with inflation and what gas prices have done. With sanctions on Russia, with OPEC Plus limiting supply, and with US producers still a bit hesitant to drill, I think, energy policy has really come into focus. So, what are you seeing on the energy policy front? And what do you expect going forward from a nation that I really do think wants to become more energy dependent in the future?
Absolutely. So we started to see gas prices rise again towards the end of the summer. And on top of that, you had the OPEC Plus decision to cut production of oil. And so that I think a lot of members of Congress saw as a poke in the eye to President Biden, who had made a trip to Saudi Arabia some months prior to try to get more production out of the country. And it also was seen as a move for Saudi Arabia supporting Russia in its war effort against Ukraine. And so as a result, the US is, a couple of weeks away from the midterm election. Gas prices are really important in this election. And so President Biden made a decision to release yet another 15 million barrels of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. He's called for energy permitting reform, and he's called for increasing even oil production as well. So this is kind of even a tacit acknowledgement from the administration that there needs to be an all of the above energy policy, even though he's also pushing for more renewable energy. We anticipate that members of Congress are also looking to take some action against Saudi Arabia. So there might be some efforts to limit arms controls, given what OPEC Plus has been doing. But I think one of the things that this shows is that coming out of this election, you are going to probably see a lot more focus on energy policy overall, particularly if the Republicans win control of Congress. We think they are going to be definitely focused on energy policy, more domestic production, and also energy infrastructure. But even in any of these election scenarios that may happen, there's going to be a greater effort on things like doing energy permitting reform. There would be a new bipartisan effort to try to get something like that done, so there would be more energy infrastructure in the US, and to try to make sure that the US is less reliant on foreign actors for our energy supplies.
That's really great context, and I actually think it fits nicely into this larger theme that you all have been talking about of deglobalization. So less dependence on foreign oil, but also things like reshoring supply chains, limiting tech exports to certain countries. I think it all kind of fits into the same bucket. And so with that in mind, I wondered if we could shift to the technology side of things, thinking about things like semiconductor policy, limiting tech exports to China, intellectual property control, and how that all fits in that larger theme and how it might impact foreign policy, specifically with regards to China as we head forward into a new administration.
Absolutely. We are definitely moving into, albeit rather slowly, we are moving into a new era of actually deglobalization rather than globalization. And some of this has been going on for quite some time, but there's definitely an understanding in the US that China is a little bit more of a national security threat rather than just an economic partner on the world stage. And so there has been a real effort in the US to start thinking about reshoring manufacturing, especially for key things like semiconductors, other emerging technologies, maybe even things like pharmaceuticals. And then there's also this effort to say to the US allies around the world that they also probably need to join the US in decoupling with China. And so this is something that we're continuing to see. It's been happening over the past two presidential administrations. We think it'll continue well into the future. This is the new path that the US is on. And there's just a couple of ideas of where you can see this happening. This summer, Congress passed the Chips and Science Act. That was a bill to increase US production and R&D of semiconductors in the United States. You've had President Biden limit exports of semiconductors and semiconductor equipment to China. He's going to also be trying to get US allies to do the same. And one of the things that we actually could see this lame duck session of Congress after the election is over is that it's very likely that Congress is going to pass a mechanism to screen US companies for their investments in China. and make decisions about whether or not those investments have a national security risk, and then being able to block those investments. So this is just a bigger move that you're going to see on more deglobalization. We think it's going to play out particularly so in the tech sector, but it'll also play into other sectors as well. But it means that for companies, there's going to be limits on where they might be able to sell their goods if they're in some of these key sectors that the US thinks is important for national security.
It definitely does feel like a kind of regime shifting moment, kind of a U-turn from the policy of the last 40 plus years. So, Jeannette, you all have done such great work for us on this topic. We have a lot of written resources for folks as well. So we want to thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll talk again soon post-election about what comes next.
Thank you so much, Ross.